The user doesn't know what they want. How many times have you heard that? Or worse, how many times have you said that? It's the perfect excuse, isn't it? The feature failed, the user didn't know what they wanted, they said one thing during research and are doing something else now. The product still hasn't gained traction. The user can't understand the value. The research gave a different result than I expected. The user can't articulate their real need. Steve Jobs once said that the user doesn't know what they want until we show them. Since then, that phrase has practically become a license for us to ignore feedback, dismiss research, and make decisions based on our own egos. Sometimes, or even most of the time, we actually do run research, right? We conduct qualitative research with users, we listen to users, but we end up steering that research in the wrong direction because we ask questions that shouldn't be asked. We ask questions with a completely misguided focus, right? And then in the end, we are left with the feeling that the problem isn't that the user doesn't know what they want, right? In reality, the problem is that we don't ask the right question, that we don't investigate properly, right? Because the fact of being in front of a user and being able to question them, right? To investigate right there, face to face with that user, that's what stings. It's a truly great and significant opportunity for us to discover, even carefully reading between the lines, what is truly not being explicitly said, but that we can indeed pick up on from some insightful answers that, when we thoughtfully connect them with others, we understand the value of that moment and we realize how important it is to ask the right questions. So, to illustrate this a bit more, I just wanted to bring up an example of an edtech startup, a product for teachers. Let's take this example of a product for teachers where we ran 3 months of discovery. I'm giving a hypothetical example. 3 months of discovery, dozens of interviews, and that classic question that's asked, which honestly gives me chills when I see either a fellow product person do it or it's included in the script they suggest, or that they share with the design team, or it might even be part of a designer's standard script, which is, what would you like our platform to do? Guys, come on, right? Questions like this will generate completely generic answers that won't tell us anything. Oh, something easier to use. That saves me time, that's intuitive, that's practical. And obviously, as a product manager, if you take part in these rounds of qualitative research, you leave feeling frustrated, thinking that the user doesn't know what they want, or you leave without clear answers and even fooling yourself, perhaps thinking that maybe what you truly had in mind for the product, the user says they want something more intuitive. See, the tutorial we added to the pages to help them. These are kind of bizarre things that happen, which come from such an open question. Actually, not even open, that's not the word, but so generic and so lacking in intent when we ask them, what would you like us to do? Ah, this here for you. Do you understand this? Is this okay for you? Do you like this color? Do you like this? Anyway, this word, this component. But this particular approach changes completely and entirely when, instead of directly asking what they truly want, what do you personally want, you instead ask them, tell me a little bit more about yesterday. How exactly was your entire Monday afternoon? And then listen carefully. And then the real answer comes, much more complete, full of packed with rich information from which you can extract things that are much more important, much more targeted, so you can address their problem, address this user's pain point. So you can ask a question like this: tell me how your Monday was. So you might get answers like, for example, yesterday I had 4 classes, 2 grade exams. So the first problem, I don't remember where I saved the spreadsheet with the grades. Oh, and then I searched for another 15 minutes. And then the second problem, the Excel spreadsheet didn't open properly on my cell phone. I had to wait until I got home. And then finally, when I finally corrected everything, I realized that I forgot to include 2 students who had taken retake. 15 minutes of conversation, and you managed to identify. And even Depending on the level of awareness of this user, he was even able to do this in his speech. When he answers a type of question like this, he can even list and point out and help you in this interpretation of pain points. So you could give 15 minutes of conversation with a question like this. Tell me how your workday with the platform was yesterday, or tell me how it was yesterday. You don't need to mention the product, but how was your workday yesterday at the school? And then he will talk to you, telling you exactly, recalling. He won't be creating an image of the future, because that image he creates in his head about the future, like what would you like to have on our platform, is not always what he will actually do. Oh, would you go if we opened the gym next door? Would you go? Oh, I would go. Ask if he actually goes. He doesn't go. If I made a fitness exercise app, would you use it? Oh, I would use it. He says he'd use it every day, but he doesn't. So when you ask questions that, if you push him to constantly think about the distant future, you are essentially making him imagine various things and scenarios that, in the long run, ultimately won't be of any practical use or benefit to you whatsoever. Because you'll be dealing with something that's not real. Now, when you ask questions that take him back to the past, to recall a memory, you can pick out situations from there that sometimes he brings up himself as pain points, or sometimes he doesn't mention them directly, he just describes them, and you, as an experienced professional, are able to identify those pain points and really create specific concrete points during your discovery process, right? Points that are actionable, right? So what doesn't the whole doesn't know what they want, and the user doesn't know what they want, ends up after an interview or investigation like this turning into, I don't know, a 2-month backlog, let's say, right? So with that in mind, I think it's important for us to break down this myth that users don't know what they want, because it hides a dangerous kind of intellectual laziness. The first point is users are not product designers. They really shouldn't know what they want in terms of features. They truly know what genuinely frustrates them, they deeply know what significantly slows them down, and they quite know what really confuses them. No worst. In other words, in reality, your role, it's not about asking for solutions, it's about understanding problems. When you ask, what do you want? You're outsourcing your main job. It's like a doctor asking which medicine you'd like to take instead of asking where it hurts. So, second point, the user is not an abstract concept. Let's start thinking this way. The user doesn't exist. What exists is Maria, 34 years old, a math teacher, following our example here, a math teacher who uses the product at 10 p.m. after putting her child to bed on a phone with 3% battery and an unstable internet connection. That's the person you really need to focus on, because the user in the abstract doesn't exist, it's just a word. So when you generalize by saying the user doesn't know, you're ignoring the fact that each person has a specific context, a specific routine, specific limitations, right? And then the third point, which is where the real challenge lies, I think this is really the core of it, right? Maybe you're also asking the wrong people. That user who doesn't know what they want might be someone who's already adapted a workaround, right? They've already come up with their own workaround for the problems, right? So they don't even notice. They don't notice it anymore. They don't realize there's still a problem, right? So basically, I can say they've normalized the pain. And finally, the user doesn't know what they want is, most of the time, folks, just a way of saying, I've realized my hypothesis was wrong, and now I'm going to blame the user, okay? So even to get out of this mental trap and start asking questions that reveal the truth, I think we can start adopting some interesting behaviors to be more assertive in these discovery processes, especially in qualitative research. So swap out, what do you want? First thing, swap what do you want for how was your day? And if you are not, in fact, the primary individual responsible for the meticulous creation of the script itself, or for diligently leading these crucial research sessions by personally interviewing the user yourself, then you should, at the very least, proactively guide or formally request the comprehensive script from your dedicated designer. so that you can thoroughly review the entire line of inquiry and the specific questions they meticulously plan to follow and ask. And if by chance there are questions that look toward the future instead of the past that don't tap into memory, that's the moment for you to step in and suggest changes, because after all, the discovery is yours. You, as a product professional, are responsible for the discovery, right? So don't ask about the ideal future. Ask about the concrete past. So tell me about the last time you tried to do X, real context, real problems. Second point, look for the hacks, the workarounds. Ask how they solve this today. I think that's a super important question, because you'll understand what was the alternative path they took before they found your product. And this is essential for you to understand, including which aspects will be the pain points of your product. Because if they're already using Excel instead of your CRM, that's a sign you have a barrier you need to overcome. So ask this question. If you find any creative workaround they're using, congratulations, you've struck gold, right? Because a workaround is a problem disguised as a solution. You need to understand what workaround your user is using to solve the pain they feel while you don't have a product to offer them. The third point, change your user. Focus on specific people. Don't interview users from broad segments like young or adult. Interview João, who works for Uber, has 2 jobs, and only accesses the app during his lunch break. The problems become more tangible. So this is fundamental. Fourth point, stop asking about features. Ask about emotions. How do you feel when you have to do this? Try to understand possible frustrations, anxiety, confusion there. If these are the pains your product needs to solve. By understanding the emotion, you can even think about the interface design itself, for example, or the user journey. So it's very important. This type of question gives us a lot of insights during qualitative research. Fifth point, and I think this one is counterintuitive. Interview people who stopped using your product. Why not? I think this is fundamental. The user who doesn't know what they want is sometimes a former user who knew exactly why they left. So by understanding why this user stopped using your product, this gives you ammunition to interpret failures you hadn't noticed. Opportunities that are right in front of you that the user can tell you they used your product, but they left. Was it the price? Was it because they don't have time? If they don't have time, why is that? What's their context? How do we address this? How do we minimize this problem of lack of time? And finally, test your own questions. If you ask yourself the same question about a product you use and the answer is generic, the question is bad. Believe it. So test your own questions. And I challenge you in your next survey or next conversation with a user to try this approach. Build your script by looking at, recalling, and drawing from the user's memory scenes from their daily life, their routines, usage contexts, where it hurts, trying to understand where the pain points are. It's also no use just asking where it hurts. What problem do you feel today? They won't know how to answer that. They'll actually give you an answer that's more on the surface. So what you really need to understand is investigate context. I think that's the message here, So in a way, you'll stop leaving frustrated, thinking that this person doesn't know what they want, and instead you'll leave curious, wondering what question you haven't asked yet. Because the difference between products that solve real problems and products that just stay on PowerPoint is exactly that, the quality of your questions, not in the answers you want to hear, right? And if after all this you still think the user doesn't know what they want, maybe it's time to question whether you know what you're asking, okay? That's it. I think the conversation gets a lot more interesting when you stop assuming the problem is on the other side of the table, right? And start questioning whether you're really investigating, whether you're leading things the right way. That's it. See you next time. Bye-bye.